President Cyril Ramaphosa's National Security Advisor, Sydney Mufamadi, is in Washington, heading a delegation there to lobby the Biden administration and congressional leaders. This comes amid concerns that South Africa's controversial stance on Russia's war in Ukraine is jeopardizing South Africa's economic and political relations with America. Let's chat about this now with international relations expert Peter Fabricius. Peter, thank you so much for making time for us. What are the stakes here? AGOA gives South Africa privileged access to this lucrative market in the U.S. We have the duty and quota-free access to that market, and that's benefited us a lot over the years. And now there's this tension, so you can't help but wonder what the consequences will be.
Yeah, it does. Last year, I think it was would have been about 60 billion rands worth of South African goods were exported to U.S. specifically under AGOA, and it's quite beneficial, particularly for like auto manufacturers. We export quite a few autos there. Also, processed food, fruit juices. And other things, and it's also symbolic in a way because I think it's a kind of confidence building thing for other traders and investors and so on to know that we have that relationship. Yeah, so it's not quite clear what's happening here. Clearly, there's a lot of unhappiness in the U.S. about our positions and on Russia and Ukraine, and a feeling that we're moving from non-aligned position, which is what we stated, and which was kind of, I suppose you could say, grudgingly accepted, towards a more aligned position. And it's things like the joint military exercise we have with China and Russia and other things like that, which are starting to make the US and other Western countries believe that we're shifting more in support of Russia. And there's been some suggestions that our continued participation in AGOA could be jeopardized as a result. It's up for renewal in 2025, but there's also a summit of AGOA, which is supposed to be taking place in South Africa in the second half of the year. And there was a lot of concerns, I know, from the US side. If we had that summit just after the BRICS summit and Putin was here and he wasn't arrested under the ICC warrant, swanning around in South Africa, and then the congressmen and women, who would be coming to AGOA might decide they don't like the optics, and that could have negative consequences. Yeah,
and speaking of congressmen and women, recently Republican members of the U.S. House of Representatives, which is controlled by the Republicans, put up this proposal, where basically they want the Biden administration to reconsider, our the U.S. relations with South Africa. They're not necessarily happy with the stance that we've taken on this war in Ukraine. Do you think that the South African delegation that's in Washington, D.C. right now is going to have a tough time in trying to explain this so-called neutral position we've taken?
I think it could have a tough time explaining it in Congress in particular, because that resolution that you're referring to was drafted by Republicans specifically in Congress, and I think it's mainly the Republicans who are unhappy with South Africa's position. I mean, look, the administration, which as you know is Democrat, also not so happy, but Biden tends to be quite sympathetic. He had Ramaphosa to visit in September on a state visit, which was quite a big deal, or working visit, I think. But those Republicans are I think the focus really of the problem in a way. And Congress, of course, is the institution that passed the AGOA in the first place 23 years ago, and is responsible for renewing it, for deciding who should be in it, and so on. So it has that responsibility. So they are quite critical. And my understanding, talking to Republican sources, is that they want to hear what South Africa's justification is for its position.
Yeah. Our government says, well, that's not a big deal, referring to that proposal we're talking about. They're saying it's not a big deal yet because it's just a mere proposal.
Yeah.
And it's not even been tabled.
Yeah, there's some confusion in my mind about that, because I understood that that resolution had been submitted.
Yeah.
There may be a semantic issue here, because look, it hasn't been adopted as I understand it. Mm-hmm. And I did hear that there's been some opinions expressed that it might not be adopted, and also that it might not be picked up by the Senate, which is Democrat controlled. But the view in any case, though, was it did express the kind of sentiments that Congress now has about South Africa's positions on Russia and China, by the way. That resolution was also very concerned about our positions on China and that trilateral China-Russia naval exercise we had in February. So even if that resolution doesn't pass, it's indicative, I was told, of the direction of thinking.
Yeah. So I want to, as a final question, want to ask you about those military exercises we decided to do with China and Russia. Because at some point, it looked like things looked good between us and the U.S. You know, there were some significant developments around our relations with the U.S. You've mentioned President Cyril Ramaphosa, you know, having that audience with President Joe Biden a few months ago. The U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, was here not so long ago. The U.S. Secretary of Treasury was also here. I can't remember the last time, Peter, we actually attracted so much U.S. diplomatic attention. But given that we've done these military exercises with Russia and China, but we said no to the military exercises, the Cutlass Express military exercises with the U.S. this year. We've said no to that, and the U.S. have said they haven't been given a proper reason from the South African government why they've declined to take part, and yet we said yes to Russia and China. Surely that is going to put us on a setback when it comes to how things have been looking between South Africa and the U.S.
Yeah, look, things are a little bit ambiguous in a way because, it is true about that exercise, the Cutlass Express. On the other hand, we did have a joint military exercise with the U.S. last year called Shared Accord. Yeah. So it's not, I think that resolution in that sense was a little bit kind of misleading in a way, because it's not like we've cancelled all military exercise with the U.S. And I think it's probably true to say that the military, certainly our military at the operational level, are very happy to continue cooperating with the U.S. They find that very useful, as well as others. Yeah. So in a way, it was the timing of that exercise with the Russians and the Chinese, the fact that the Russians had this very potent frigate participating that supposedly was carrying these hypersonic missiles that can, avoid all NATO anti-missile defenses and so on, which sounded like we were helping the Russians, in their ability to sort of fire missiles at enemies, including the U.S. and, Ukraine. So the optics were not great. So I think that's where we're at, that we're starting to tilt into the sort of the doubtful column in terms of relations with the U.S. And so, I mean, that's why they sent this mission. Some people think, well, this is all exaggerated as concern, which it might be. But on the other hand, clearly the President Ramaphosa felt that there was enough of an issue here to send his national security advisor, Sydney Mufamadi, at the head of a delegation to the U.S. to try to, to reassure them that we're still neutral, we're still non-aligned, and they have nothing to worry about.
Yeah. Peter Fabricius, thank you for joining us for this conversation.